He who does not confront the darkness within himself will be forced to meet it outside, in the form of destiny. A short sentence, yet like a cold blade, it cuts through the facade humanity wears every day. It was written in a bygone era, yet it speaks to us today, where we live amidst the din of progress, while our souls grow increasingly silent within. This journey into the undiscovered self doesn't tell stories or preach. Instead, it opens a mirror, in which there is no main character but the reader themselves. This work is neither philosophy nor purely psychology. It is a spiritual journey, an expedition into the unilluminated territories of the human being. The author doesn't discuss what we should become, but compels us to look directly at what we are asterisk. In that silence, we encounter a dark realm full of symbols, nameless fears, hidden desires, and dreams that seem meaningless yet contain the true lifeblood of the soul. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the modern age isn't war or poverty, but the alienation between humanity and its own self. We understand everything data, the universe, technology, yet we fail to grasp what our own soul desires. We can predict planetary storms, but remain oblivious to the tempests raging within our own hearts. The smarter we become, the easier it is to lull ourselves into a false sense of control. And precisely then, the unconscious begins to speak through dreams, through moments of unease, through an unnamed emptiness amidst an ordinary day. This book offers no method, nor does it promise peace. It poses a question no one has definitively answered. If humanity has explored the entire sky, why has it yet to comprehend the darkness within itself? That question is like a door opening into the deepest reaches of consciousness, where reason must bow, where the soul demands to be heard. And perhaps, only when we dare to cross this threshold will humanity truly know what it means to awaken. The modern world has erected gleaming walls of reason and order. People call it progress. But behind that veneer, something is cracking, the loneliness of the individual amidst the crowd. I witnessed it in the dark years when an entire nation was hypnotized by collective symbols, when people readily renounced themselves to become mere cogs in a machine. That problem has not vanished. It has merely changed form in a world we call free. Today, humanity lives in the security of numbers. Everything is measured, counted, classified, labeled in the statistics of states, science, and media systems. All speak a common language, the majority is truth. But the truth of the masses can never speak for the soul of an individual. When we become a unit of population, a subject of study, a consumer, the deepest part of our humanity begins to erode. As the crowd grows, the soul shrinks, for the crowd has no conscience, only impulse. A nation can be perfectly organized, but if each individual within loses connection with their own conscience, that perfection is merely an empty shell. Fear, when collectivized, transforms into fanaticism. And in fanaticism, people no longer see sin in destroying others, for they believe they are serving something greater than themselves. I have witnessed thinkers and scientists believe that reason and technological progress alone are enough to protect humanity. But reason cannot save a soul that has lost its way. Reason illuminates only what is known. The unknown, the dark, ambiguous part of humanity is where both good and evil reside. When we deny that dark part, it doesn't disappear. It merely finds another path to rise, often in the guise of extremist ideologies. Today, when war can erupt with the push of a button, when tools of thought control can be so sophisticated that people no longer realize they are being led, the problem is no longer conflict between nations, but the rift within the human soul. We fear ourselves, and so we seek refuge in the crowd. We believe we are free, but in truth, we are merely seeking an excuse not to think alone. Modern society exalts science as a new religion, yet science cannot answer the question, who am I? It only tells us about the body's structure, behavioral mechanisms, and reaction probabilities. It measures everything except the meaning of existence. And when meaning is lost, people turn to ideologies promising collective salvation. There, they are given a role, a title, an ideal. But an ideal cannot replace self-understanding. Those who once believed they were fighting for a better future often fail to realize they are being guided by the collective unconscious, which harbors humanity's primitive instincts. The crowd doesn't think, it merely reacts. And when an individual merges with the crowd, personal intelligence is lost, leaving only survival instinct and the fear of exclusion. Thus, a new form of slavery is born, no chains needed, only conformity. I am not against science, nor do I deny the value of social organization. But any system that treats humans as mere tools sows the seeds of its own destruction. A civilization is truly robust only when each individual within it possesses independent consciousness and the capacity for self-judgment. Without individuals, there is no humanity. Without souls, there is no civilization. Yet modern humans increasingly fear themselves. They fear listening to their inner voice, for within lies too much chaos, too many contradictions. They choose the comfort of conformity over the solitude of awakening. But it is precisely in solitude that we hear the true voice of the soul. There is no path to freedom that does not pass through that fear. Sometimes I think this world is like a room full of mirrors. Everyone sees reflections of others, but no one dares to confront their own reflection. We fear that if we look long enough, we will realize the face in the mirror no longer belongs to us. But it is in that very moment, when we confront the naked truth, that the real journey truly begins. Humans need faith to live, but faith cannot be externally imposed. It must arise from the soul's direct experience. When faith is replaced by systems, religion by rituals, and ethics by slogans, people become compliant creatures. And the most terrifying thing is not the tyranny of another, but the tyranny of one's own unconscious. When we are no longer conscious of it, society will gradually slide towards darkness. Not because evil triumphs, but because good people have stopped listening to their inner voice. The silence of the individual soul is the most fertile ground for violence and fanaticism to flourish. I don't say this to sow fear, but to remind you that as long as humanity still knows how to question itself, hope will endure. From the loneliness of the individual in the age of the crowd, where each person must rediscover the lost part of themselves. Otherwise, the world will seek to define them amidst the chaotic currents of the era. As old faiths slowly crumble, and religion once the compass for the human soul is now replaced by the dogmas of science and collectivism, people say the world has become more enlightened, more rational, more civilized. But is that truly so? When people grow increasingly empty and bewildered amidst the very lives they have created, religion, in its original sense, is not an organization or a ritual. It is humanity's direct experience of the sacred, the feeling of being touched by something beyond comprehension. When humans still trembled before the mystery of existence, they knew their own smallness. But when they believe they hold all the laws of the universe in their hands, they also lose the capacity for wonder, and with it, their soul. Systems of power understand this well. For an individual with personal faith is an individual who cannot be controlled. When faith is replaced by generic formulas, people become more pliable. They can be gathered, directed, and made to use slogans in place of prayer, political symbols in place of sacred ones. People no longer need to encounter God in the stillness of their hearts. They merely need to believe in the greatness of the collective. Thus, a new religion is born, the religion of the masses, of power, of safety in numbers. There, the sacred is reduced to a psychological tool, a means of behavioral control. Faith turns into habit, devotion into formality. People pray not out of a yearning for enlightenment, but out of fear of exclusion from the community. What is called morality is no longer an inner voice, but merely outward compliance. Religion is disguised as a system for soul management. The West was once the birthplace of profound dialogues between humanity and God. But in the intoxication of science and rationalism, people began to doubt their very capacity to perceive the sacred. They wanted to measure faith with facts, to prove the soul with formulas. When they couldn't, they concluded that the sacred did not exist. And thus, a giant void opened in the human soul, a void no theory could ever fill. This void drives people to despair, yet they hide it behind a facade of composure. Deep down, everyone feels the disconnection between the life they are living and the life that once animated them. A modern person might pride themselves on their knowledge, but when night falls and all sounds grow silent, they still perceive an unnamed emptiness. That is the echo of a forgotten soul, the cry of the unlived part of humanity. I am not against progress, but every step forward by reason needs to be balanced by a deeper step into inner life. When humanity ventures too far along the path of knowledge, it needs a different light not to get lost in its own darkness. And that light is religious consciousness in its deepest sense, not blind faith, but the capacity to recognize that there is something beyond our comprehension. Today, people fear speaking of religion, afraid of being seen as superstitious. But superstition lies not in faith, but in a lack of understanding of what one believes. When people no longer converse with the sacred, they replace it with other idols, political ideals, science, even themselves. And thus, religion doesn't disappear, it merely changes its name. I have met many who say they don't need God. They believe in science, in reason, in the power of humanity. But I realize that in that very assertion, they are admitting a fear of what lies beyond their control. When we dare not look into the infinite, we become obsessed with the trivial. And when that fear is suppressed, it becomes the driving energy for all fanaticism. For humans always need something to believe in. The spiritual crisis of our age is not a lack of religion, but the loss of the ability to vividly experience the sacred. People speak of morality, but few dare to live honestly with the darkness within themselves. People discuss the meaning of life, but rarely will anyone step into the lightless places to find answers. That is why the world is full of doctrines but lacks awakening, full of creeds but short on soul. If humanity truly wishes to escape spiritual slavery, they must learn to re-encounter the sacred not through intermediaries, not through systems, but through their own direct experience. When one can feel the sacred in their breath, in pain, in silence, they are no longer easily led. For then, they need no one to tell them what to believe. They have seen it with the very eyes of their soul. The world will change not when we create another new religion, but when each person begins to live as if their own soul is a sacred place needing care. The sacred is not high above. It is right here, in the awakening of every moment. And as long as humanity still knows how to bow before the mystery of life itself, hope will continue to be held in the heart of humanity. A silent question echoes through all ages: how can humanity understand itself? It seems like the simplest thing, yet in the modern world, it is the most luxurious. We can see our reflection in a mirror, know our name, profession, and background, yet know nothing of the person hidden behind all these things. We know we exist, but not why. We know we are living, but not clearly for whom. The people I meet all believe they understand themselves, but when asked more deeply, they only refer to their roles in society: parent, employee, citizen, believer. All these titles are masks. They give us a sense of stability, but also conceal the most authentic part of the soul. A person might be successful, respected, yet deep down still hear the vague calling of a part of their being that has never truly lived. That calling is not loud, but persistent, like a tiny crack in the silence. The world around us encourages people to look outwards, to learn to be better than others, to work to be recognized, to speak to be heard. But all the most profound things begin when we turn inwards. There is no light of reason, only a hazy realm where impulses, memories, fears, and dreams mingle. Many stop at that threshold because they fear the darkness within themselves. They imagine that if they look too deeply, they will see things they shouldn't. But darkness is not an enemy. It is the forgotten part awaiting to be heard. When people dare to look within, they begin to realize that all external conflicts are merely reflections of the conflicts within their own souls. The true enemy is the unacknowledged instinctual self. Evil is the part of light denied for so long that it transforms into hatred. Understanding oneself is not about dissecting to find answers, but about confronting to learn how to live with those contradictions. For within every human being, there are both angels and demons, both the noble and the petty. To deny one part is to tear apart one's own wholeness. I once believed knowledge could save humanity. But after years of listening to dreams and fears, I realized that knowledge is merely a lamp illuminating the surface, while the unconscious is the ocean beneath. When we step into those waters, we are no longer in control, but merely learners of how to swim. It is a journey of humility, a journey where humanity learns to trust what lies beyond understanding. Self-understanding cannot be achieved through concepts. It comes from experience, from listening to dreams, recognizing symbols, observing the soul's slightest reactions to life. Every dream image, every fear, every longing is a messenger from the unconscious. They speak not in words, but in metaphors. Those who know how to listen to them will gradually discern the subtle structure of their own soul. But modern humans want quick results. They want formulas to understand themselves, rules to control their emotions. They forget that the soul is not a machine. It doesn't operate by theory, but by its own rhythm, a slow, transformative pulse. Anyone who wishes to understand it must learn to stop trying to understand and instead begin to observe with respect. I often say that self-understanding doesn't begin with I know, but with I don't know. When we are humble enough to admit our obscurity, a new door opens. In that moment, we are no longer investigators of ourselves, but guided by our own soul. It speaks not through logic, but through signs, a feeling, an image, a dream. These small things, if listened to, can lead us further than any book. Though it speaks of freedom, society fears truly free individuals. For a self-aware individual cannot be controlled. They are no longer dependent on praise or condemnation, nor swayed by propaganda. They become the nucleus of change, not through grand actions, but through silent awakening. Such a person can stand amidst the crowd without dissolving, can be silent yet radiate strength. However, this journey is not easy, for to understand oneself, one must pass through pain. They must confront the things they once denied, their selfishness, fears, hatred, their own pettiness. Only when we dare to touch the wound can it heal. And when the wound heals, it leaves not a scar, but wisdom. A wisdom that cannot be learned in school, but can only mature from experience. A human being is not a fixed ego, but a flowing stream. Understanding oneself is not about confining oneself within definitions, but about living in the continuous movement between light and dark, between knowing and not knowing. When we understand that we are constantly changing, we cease to fear impermanence. And it is at that very moment that we touch the deepest part of freedom. No one can show another the way on this journey. Each person is their own universe, with a map written by their own dreams, memories, and experiences. But one thing is certain: the path inward always leads to the same place, an encounter with the sacred hidden within the soul itself. And when people touch that, they will no longer seek God outside themselves. They realize He is still there, right in their breath, in their gaze, in the silence of their beating heart. From the dawn of time, humanity has incessantly questioned the meaning of life. Philosophers sought truth through reason, building massive systems where everything had an explanation. But no matter how profound philosophy may be, it only touches the surface of lived experience. It can analyze goodness, but cannot make a heart benevolent. It can explain fear, but cannot help anyone tremble less in the dark of night. Reason illuminates, but only like a lamp shining on the water's surface. Deep below, the soul remains a vast, wordless darkness. I have always admired philosophers for their courage in using intellect to seek the absolute. But humans do not live by concepts. They live by emotions, by contradictions, by desires and regrets. No matter how beautiful any idea, it will vanish if it cannot touch the deepest part within us. This is why I believe that psychology, in its broadest sense, is not merely the study of humanity, but an encounter between a human being and themselves. It doesn't aim to reach absolute truth, but opens a path for us to recognize the unique truth of each soul. Philosophy asks, what is the world? While psychology asks, who am I in that world? The second question is smaller but also more terrifying, for answering it requires not just deduction, but courage. It is the courage to confront the unwanted truths when we step through the door of the inner self. There, all definitions of good and evil, right and wrong, become ambiguous. Only naked honesty remains, where one is forced to see oneself, stripped of all disguise. I have met many who believe that merely understanding psychological theories is enough to change oneself. But understanding does not equate to transformation. One might know they are selfish, yet remain selfish. Know they are afraid, yet still flee. Know they are hurt, yet not dare to forgive. This is because knowledge only touches the conscious mind, while what truly controls us lies in the deep layers of the unconscious, where reason holds no power. The unconscious is not an enemy, but the soul's silent teacher. It sends us dreams, symbols, intuitions. Each time we listen, it reveals another piece of the larger picture. But if we ignore it, those pieces will turn into chaos. They will find other ways to demand attention through anxiety, obsessions, groundless fears. When we don't converse with the unconscious, it will speak for us in the language of disorder. Therefore, self-understanding is not a learning process, but a living journey. We cannot grasp it with concepts. We can only experience it through feeling. True understanding comes from the soul's experience, not the intellect of the mind. It is the moment we realize we've done something reason once for bad and suddenly understand why we had to do it. It's when we find ourselves crying over a dream or trembling before an old memory for no clear reason. All these experiences are lessons the unconscious sends, not to teach, but to remind us that we are still alive. Self-understanding is a continuous negotiation between the conscious and unconscious. If the conscious mind is too strong, people become rigid, hypocritical, self-centered. If the unconscious overflows, we fall into chaos, with instinct dominating behavior. Only when both sides learn to listen to each other can the soul achieve a state of balance. That is what I call wholeness, not perfection, but a unity between light and dark, between who one wants asterisk to be and who one truly is. The modern world makes us believe we must eliminate the bad parts of ourselves to become better. But everything denied will return in a more distorted form. When we try to suppress anger, it turns into bitterness. When we deny fear, it becomes apathy. The only way to overcome darkness is to look directly at it and name it. Once darkness is acknowledged, it loses its power. It becomes a companion, no longer a tormentor. That is the true meaning of self-understanding, not separating good from evil, but seeing our entire being without judgment. When we dare to look, we begin to love. And when love appears, healing begins, no effort needed, no explanation, just complete presence with oneself. From that, compassion for others also arises, because we realize everyone is grappling with their own darkness in a world of reason and rules. This may sound illogical, but the human soul doesn't operate by logic. It operates by symbols. Every image, every memory, every movement of emotion carries a deeper meaning than its outward appearance. Those who know how to listen to the symbols in life will understand the language of their own soul. But those who regard them merely as random phenomena will forever wander in the labyrinth of their own consciousness. Thus, the path to self-understanding is not about climbing higher, but delving deeper. It is like digging a well in the darkness to find the hidden spring beneath the earth. The deeper we go, the closer we get to the essence of life. True understanding comes not from adding more, but from stripping away prejudices, roles, borrowed voices. Until there's nothing left to cling to, we suddenly find ourselves naked. Yet, in that nakedness, the soul begins to breathe freely. And when people begin to breathe with themselves, no longer seeking salvation from systems or other beliefs, that is when they truly touch the sacred. Self-understanding is not separate from life. It is life illuminated from within. And when that light blazes forth, it shines not just for one person, but for all humanity. For every awakened soul is a small lamp helping to dispel the collective darkness of the world. When humans have moved beyond the layers of rational perception, when they have seen themselves in both light and shadow, the ultimate question remains: what is the true meaning of self-understanding? Is it merely to live better, or is there something deeper, beyond what language can describe? Self-understanding is not an achievement, but a beginning. When people understand themselves, they don't reach a destination. Instead, they open up a new world, a world of vivid consciousness. In it, we no longer see life as an external object, but as a flowing movement intertwined with ourselves. There is no longer I and the world, only the participation of a soul awakening amidst the cosmos. And it is in that awakening that humanity truly becomes free. Freedom lies not in doing what one wants, but in the capacity to understand why one wants it. When we comprehend the roots of our desires, fears, and longings, we are no longer bound by them. We become observers, not victims of our emotions. That is a freedom no one can bestow, nor can anyone take it away. It arises from clarity, from recognizing that within us, light and dark always coexist, and both deserve to be heard. Someone asked me, if humans always possess both good and evil, how can they live in peace? I replied that peace does not come from eradicating darkness, but from acknowledging its presence. When we stop fighting ourselves, the energy meant for conflict transforms into understanding. And in understanding, we realize that everything in life, even suffering, is a means for the soul to grow. Every failure, every wound, every fear carries a message. Whoever can read their language will no longer fear life. Self-knowledge is not mere knowledge, but a sacred encounter between a person and their deepest self. It doesn't happen in the clamor of a lecture hall, but in the most silent moments when all external voices fall quiet, leaving only breath and consciousness. That is when people realize that what they call I is merely a small wave on the boundless ocean of life. And when they let go of the illusion of ego, they return to that ocean, no longer separate, no longer alone. Society can continue to operate by laws and power, but as long as people haven't found themselves, all reforms are merely thin paint over a deep crack. A better world cannot be created by people who don't understand themselves, for they will bring their darkness into every structure they build. The only way to change the world is for each individual to change themselves. Each person is a cell of humanity, and when each cell is healthy, the collective body can be healthy. Many await miracles from outside, but true miracles only happen when we dare to confront the truth within. Self-understanding is not a selfish act, but a sacred duty towards humanity. For when a person awakens, they subtly soothe the chaos around them. Their inner peace spreads like a small flame, warming an entire darkroom. No preaching needed, no arguments, just presence. Sometimes I think the most frightening thing about our age isn't war or destructive technology, but the emptiness of the soul. Humans can reach Mars, yet they don't know how to reach their own hearts. They speak of humanity but forget the individual. They flee into networks, models, AI algorithms, believing they can understand themselves through data. But the soul is not a code. It cannot be solved by formulas, it can only be felt through living. When we let AI measure human nature, we are trying to fix something inherently dynamic. The soul refuses to be digitized. It only reveals itself when we know how to be silent and listen. I write these things not as precepts, but as the testimony of one who has seen the abyss in the souls of others and in my own. I know that true understanding does not make us arrogant, but humble. When people understand the contradictory nature within themselves, they judge others less. When they see the darkness within themselves, they are less quick to condemn. When they see the light in others, they learn how to love. And that is the true foundation of morality. In an age where every value can be bought and sold, self-understanding becomes a silent act of resistance. It is a declaration that the soul remains sacred, that there is something within humanity that cannot be manipulated. Self-knowledge is an unextinguishable flame in humanity's long night. It reminds us that each person, however small, is a dwelling place for the infinite. No one can speak for our soul, just as no one can live for us. If there is one final word, I want to say that understanding oneself is not an end in itself, but a duty. By illuminating our own soul, we contribute to illuminating the world. When a person sees the truth within themselves, they light up a part of humanity. And when enough souls awaken together, the collective darkness will dissipate, not by force, but by light. That is the deepest meaning of self-understanding, not just to live, but so that humanity can continue to live. For only when humanity reunites with its soul will the world truly have a future. Humans always dream, whether they sleep in palaces or wander in the open air. When night falls, eyes close, and another world opens, a world of images not controlled by will. There, reason falls silent, and the soul begins to speak. In dreams, we are not the controllers but the guided. There are images we don't understand, emotions we dare not name, but all come from the same source. The unconscious, the deep realm where the soul lives authentically. Dreams are the oldest voice humanity has ever had. Before learning to speak with words, people knew how to dream. Myths, religious symbols, mystical intuitions, all are legacies of the dream language. Every dream is a message sent from the deep layers of the soul, where invisible wisdom silently works. But the modern world, in its intoxication with reason, has forgotten how to read this language. We only know how to call dreams hallucinations of a tired mind or chemical reactions of the brain. And so, the door between humanity and its own soul closes. I have heard many people recount their dreams as if they were meaningless. One person dreams of falling endlessly without hitting the ground, another sees a child calling them from afar. They laugh it off, saying it's just from eating too much or thinking too hard. But when I ask, "What was your feeling in the dream?" they fall silent. Because dreams don't speak through reason, they speak through emotion. That feeling, be it fear, anguish, bewilderment, or serenity, is the first clue to the unconscious message. Every dream is a question the soul sends to the conscious mind. Are you still listening to me? Dreams are a spontaneous product of the unconscious. No one can force them to appear, nor prevent them from arising. They are like the soul's breath, natural, patient, and honest. No matter what we try to hide, dreams still reflect the truth. They do not know how to pretend. When we live contrary to our true self during the day, at night the dream will repaint our true image, sometimes cruelly, sometimes compassionately. Dreams are the mirror in which the soul gazes at itself, a warning bell when humanity begins to deviate from its axis of life. Many ask, how do we distinguish an important dream from a random one? I reply, no dream is random. Even the most trivial dreams carry within them traces of an inner order. We may not understand them today, but the unconscious never speaks idly. It is the part that knows more than us, the part that has witnessed everything we have forgotten. Sometimes dreams warn of illness, of danger, of an unrecognized conflict. Sometimes they simply remind us that we have lived too far from our emotions, too far from joy. I have encountered dreams with strange power, as if sent from beyond time. One person dreamt of a great river separating him from his loved ones. Just weeks later, that person passed away. A girl dreamt of her house collapsing. The next morning, she learned her father had died. These dreams are not prophecies in a supernatural sense, but manifestations of unconscious sensitivity, where all events are felt before the conscious mind can name them. The soul has known for a very long time what the intellect cannot yet grasp. Dreams not only illuminate the individual, but also serve as a mirror of the age. When society is obsessed with power, human dreams are filled with violence. When the era loses faith, dreams become confused, ambiguous, filled with shattered symbols. The unconscious belongs not only to the individual, but also to the collective. It carries the memories of humanity, images that transcend personal experience, motifs that have existed since the first humans trembled before a night fire. The modern world views dreams as mere neural play, but the ancients saw them as a gateway to the divine. They understood that in the darkness of dreams, humanity is not alone, and ancient wisdom speaks to us through images. When we learn to listen to dreams, we not only understand ourselves better, but also reconnect with the sacred depths of life. For the sacred is not far away. It is hidden in the very images we see when we sleep, in the vague calls we don't understand yet still find familiar. I am not telling people to blindly believe in dreams. I am simply saying, listen to them as you would a true friend. When a dream tells us something, it doesn't seek to frighten but to help us return to balance. If we rush too fast during the day, the dream will make us pause. If we are too cold, it will ignite forgotten emotions. If we are too arrogant, it will pull us down to re-examine ourselves. And if we are desperate, it will send a tiny image, just enough to restore faith. Beneath the fragile layer of consciousness that humans proudly claim to master, the unconscious operates like a vibrant organ, silently adjusting and balancing the entire spiritual life. It is not just a repository of forgotten memories, but an intelligent system in its own right. Like an underground stream that always finds its way to stability, when we lean too far to one side, the unconscious automatically creates a compensatory force in the opposite direction. Thanks to this, the human soul does not collapse, no matter how many times the mind loses its way. The unconscious has two main functions, compensation and premonition. The compensatory function is like the body's self-healing instinct. When the conscious mind is too rational, the unconscious sends emotional dreams. When we are too rigid, it evokes images of vulnerability. When we are submerged in self-doubt, it projects a dream filled with pride. This mechanism is not meant to punish, but to remind us that humans are only healthy when the two poles light and dark, reason and instinct, conscious and unconscious, are kept in balance. Every dream, no matter how peculiar, is an effort by the soul to restore lost order. Imagine the human psyche as an ancient tree. The conscious mind is the crown reaching towards the light, while the unconscious is the root system spreading beneath the earth. When the crown leans too far to one side, the roots silently adjust, seeking the opposite direction to keep the trunk upright. If the conscious mind forgets its roots, the tree will wither and die. If only roots remain without a crown, the tree will be engulfed in darkness. Human life lies in the dialogue between these two parts, a dialogue often stifled by the modern world's clamor of reason and data. I have met many who claim to be stable and successful, yet in their dreams, they were chased, falling into abysses, or seeing their houses burn. These images are not random. They are signals from the unconscious, sent when the psyche begins to deviate from its center. The external stability is merely a coat of paint over a widening crack within, And if that person knows how to listen, the dream can save them from collapse. But if they ignore it, the unconscious will find stronger ways to be heard. Anxiety attacks, psychosomatic illnesses, inexplicable emotional outbursts. The second function of the unconscious is premonition, not in a mystical sense, but in a psychological one. The unconscious sees the seeds growing within us before the conscious mind can recognize them. If someone is living too fast, their dreams will show images of slowing down, a broken arm, a constrained step. If someone is trying to hide their emotions, the dream will bring images of overflowing, breaking water carrying things away. This is not predicting the future, but a guiding map for timely adjustment. The unconscious doesn't say, this asterisk will asterisk happen. It says, if you continue like this, your soul asterisk will asterisk break. The miraculous thing is that the unconscious is always honest. It never lies to comfort us. No matter who we are, what our status, the dream dares to expose the part of ourselves we don't want to confront. That is why many fear dreams. They fear the truth dreams reveal. But only when we are brave enough to listen do dreams become companions instead of adversaries. They are not against us. They are only against pretense. I have seen strange cases. People who appeared strong and successful, yet their dreams were filled with images of abandoned children. When they understood the message, they burst into tears, realizing that child was the fragile part of their being they had buried. From that moment, they began to change, not through reason, but through understanding that came from deep within their soul. Dreams don't mend people through logic. They heal by making them asterisk feel. The unconscious also does another crucial thing. It teaches us humility. In a world obsessed with control, people forget that some parts cannot be dominated. Dreams remind us that the soul is not property, but a flowing stream. When we try to overly dominate ourselves, that stream resists with obscure images. It teaches us a lesson that reason cannot: letting go. Only when the conscious mind learns to listen will the soul cease to scream in the darkness. But the modern world tries to silence the unconscious. People work themselves to exhaustion, use sleeping pills to forget dreams. They want to extinguish the inner voice because it makes them uncomfortable. Yet, when people no longer dream, they also lose the soul's self-regulating mechanism. A society that doesn't dream is a society that has lost the ability to heal itself. And then the illness of individuals will spread into the illness of all humanity, the disease of hardening, where everything functions perfectly, except the soul. Dreams cannot be controlled, but they can be understood. When we begin to remember, reflect upon, and respect what dreams send us, the unconscious will gradually become cooperative. It no longer throws out nightmares, but creates richly symbolic images that are easier to read, more approachable. Then, humanity and the unconscious enter into a dialogue, an equal relationship. Two voices together move towards balance. And in that dialogue, people relearn a lost skill, the skill of living with oneself. Remember, dreams are never the enemy of consciousness. They are a reflective mirror, the soul's second heartbeat. When consciousness strays from its center, the unconscious guides us back. When we forget our emotions, it teaches us to feel. When we believe ourselves omnipotent, it reminds us that we are but a small part of a greater whole. The unconscious is the most silent yet honest friend humanity has ever had. Those who despise it will live in illusion. Those who know how to listen to it will live in truth. And it is in that communion that the human soul reclaims the wholeness lost by the age. The language of dreams is not one that human consciousness can easily understand. Dreams don't speak in words, but in images. They don't reason, but evoke feelings. Every dream is a symbolic painting, where every detail carries its own meaning. A bird flying across the sky, a door opening, or a room filled with water, these things cannot be translated by formulas because they are born from the deep layers of the unconscious, where logical thought no longer reigns. If we impose rational frameworks upon them, we will kill the soul of the dream. I have realized that every dream has its own intrinsic structure, like a short story narrated by the soul. That story has a beginning, climax, and end, not in linear time, but according to the movement of emotions. To understand it, we must learn to step into that painting, to feel the breath of each image. A dream is not a problem to solve, but a garden to enter. Only when we stand still in that garden, listening to the sound of the leaves, can we hear the true whisper of the unconscious. The best way to understand a dream is to orbit its center instead of rushing to interpret it. We should linger with each detail, allowing it to reveal its meaning on its own. A flower in a dream is not just a flower. It could be childhood, aspiration, the memory of a forgotten morning. When we ask, "How does this flower make me feel?" we begin to hear the soul's voice. Interpretation is only valuable when it stems from genuine emotion, not borrowed knowledge. For the unconscious doesn't speak in concepts, it speaks in experiences. I have seen many make the mistake of analyzing dreams like a symbol dictionary. They believe a snake always represents lust, water always represents emotion, a house is the body. But no symbol carries a fixed meaning in a person's dream. A snake might represent danger in one dream and rebirth in another. A dream can only be understood in the living relationship between the symbol and the dreamer. Ignoring this turns the symbol into a dead sign, and the soul falls silent. Emotion is the key to unlock the door of dreams. An image that evokes no emotion holds no meaning. When a dreamer recounts their dream, the first thing I ask is, "How did you feel at that moment?" Because emotion is the shortest path to true meaning. A dream might be strange, but the dreamer's feelings are always real. A fear in a dream often points to something we denied during the day. A sudden joy might be a sign of a part of the soul just liberated. Every emotion is a piece of the map leading us back to our center. Each person has their own personality type, introverted or extroverted, inclined towards reason or emotion, and this affects how they dream and how they understand dreams. Extroverts often have dreams revolving around the external world, strangers, crowds, events. Introverts, conversely, dream of symbolic spaces, indistinct faces. Those inclined towards reason often have fragmented, emotionless dreams. Those inclined towards emotion have dreams rich in color and sound. Therefore, one cannot apply the same method to everyone. Interpreting dreams is like listening to a voice. To understand, one must know who is speaking. Sometimes I liken dream interpretation to a dialogue between two languages, the language of light and the language of shadow. Consciousness speaks in words, the unconscious responds in images. One is logical, the other mystical. When these two languages learn to understand each other, the soul achieves a rare harmony. But when consciousness rushes to impose, the unconscious will resist with silence or increasingly chaotic dreams. Interpreting dreams is not about mastering the unconscious, but learning to listen to it as an equal friend. People ask me, "How do I know I've understood a dream correctly?" I say there is no correct in an absolute sense. It is understanding only when the interpretation brings peace to the soul. An interpretation might be theoretically precise, but if the dreamer doesn't feel touched by it, it's just cold knowledge. Conversely, sometimes a vague image can make a person burst into tears. And in those tears, we know the unconscious has been heard. Understanding in dreams is not a conclusion, but an empathy between two layers of the same person. A dream is a poem the unconscious writes each night, and we are its only readers. If we read with the heart, we will find ourselves in those wordless verses, but if we read only with the mind, we will find it meaningless. Each person needs to relearn the language of images, the language we once knew as children. When not bound by logic, a child doesn't need to explain a dream, they live within it. And perhaps that is the most perfect way to understand, to live with symbols instead of trying to define them. The language of dreams is the language of nature. In nature, there are no wrong statements, only different forms of expression. A mountain needs no reason to exist. A dream is the same, it simply is. And within that is-ness lies the wisdom of life. When people relearn to speak this language, they will no longer be estranged from their instinctual self. They will see that every image, a river, a cloud, a flower, has a soul, and dreams are where these souls meet. There are no unconditional universal symbols, only living symbols within personal contexts. The only universal truth is the yearning to return to oneself. Dreams never lead us further than our own inner center. Every image converges there, no matter how circuitous or metaphorical it may be. And when we understand a dream, we are not just decoding a psychological phenomenon, we are listening to our own soul speak in humanity's most ancient voice. There are dreams that transcend the scope of individual memory. They possess a strange power, both alien and familiar, as if from ancient times before we existed. These are dreams of archetypal symbols, images not individually created, but collectively shared by humanity through thousands of years of spiritual evolution. In them, we encounter motifs that the Greeks, Egyptians, and primitive tribes also dreamt: the snake, the mother, the child, the circle, the world tree, the night sea. These images are not products of random imagination, but echoes of collective memory, the deepest layer of the unconscious. When a dream carries archetypal energy, we feel it immediately through intuition. It is no longer a small, personal dream but a cosmic experience. The dreamer awakens with a feeling of being touched by the sacred, a fear mixed with awe, an inexpressible sense of overwhelm. I call that the sacred charge, the numinos energy. It gives dreams the power to transform people, not because of their content, but because of the emotions. They awaken emotions so profound that we feel ourselves standing before something beyond comprehension. An archetype is not an image, but a pattern. The image is merely the way it manifests. For example, the mother is an archetype that can appear in dreams in many forms: a gentle woman, enveloping water, or a devouring storm. The mother can nourish and also destroy. She both gives birth and consumes. The power of the archetype lies in that very contradiction, where good and evil coalesce, just as light and shadow coexist. When humans encounter an archetype in a dream, they don't just meet an image, they meet a primal part of their own being. Religious symbols are the path humanity has used to converse with archetypes. Deities, rituals, scriptures, all are attempts to formalize the invisible. When religion was vibrant, its symbols still carried emotional power. But when symbols are repeated lifelessly, they become empty shells, losing their sacred charge. The unconscious then must find other ways to speak, through dreams, through art, through mental crises. Religious images appearing in dreams are not signs of superstition, but the return of archetypal energy that has been suppressed for too long. I once met a middle-aged man who dreamt he was kneeling before a giant, burning cross. He wasn't religious, yet the dream brought him to tears. Rationally, it was just a strange image. But for the soul, it was a confrontation between the old burning away and the sacred desiring rebirth. When human consciousness drifts from religious depth, the unconscious will create its own rituals to restore balance. Dreams are the last functioning temple in a world that has forgotten how to pray. Religious symbols, in their deepest sense, do not belong to church or doctrine. They are a bridge between the conscious and unconscious, between humanity and what transcends humanity. When we contemplate a symbol with respect, its energy is activated, like an electrical circuit being connected. We feel ourselves no longer separate, but belonging to a greater order. But when symbols are treated as mere decorations or tools of persuasion, that circuit breaks, and people, though they believe they have progressed, actually become emptier. Within each person lies a sacred ground where the unconscious and conscious can meet without intermediaries. When we dream of temples, spirit animals, light, or images that evoke reverence, that is the soul finding its way back to that sacred ground. Religious dreams do not call for blind faith. They invite us into a direct experience of the sacred. There, we are no longer observers but participants. In this day and age, when people regard religion as a relic and science as the savior, religious symbols gradually lose their vitality. But when symbols die, the unconscious will create new ones. We see new saviors in the guise of political ideals and leaders, promising order, knowledge, immortality, dreams that religion once embraced. The difference is that they have no soul. Instead of salvation, they drive people further from their sacred selves. Humans cannot live without symbols, just as a tree cannot live without roots. Symbols are the language of the unconscious, the way the soul maintains dialogue with the cosmos. When symbols are alive, society has a soul. When symbols lose meaning, society becomes soulless, and people will dream of apocalypse. Therefore, each person's task is not to protect old symbols, but to keep the energy within them alive. Every time we contemplate them with sincerity, symbols come alive. Every time we repeat them mechanically, symbols die. Sometimes I think the modern world is like a collective dream trying to understand itself. We build cathedrals of technology, light candles with screen light, pray before data. But deep within the unconscious, the soul still yearns for a true symbol, an image that makes it feel touched by the sacred, a dream. With archetypal power, That is the unconscious's answer to that thirst. It reminds us that the sacred is not dead. It is merely waiting for us to remember how to see. When people learn to respect symbols again, they will realize that the sacred is not far away, not high above, but hidden within the very images living within them each night. Dreams are the soul's silent ritual, an altar no one can destroy. And when we kneel before it, not out of fear, but out of reverence, the path to healing between humanity and the sacred will reopen, like an underground spring finding its way back to the sea. When humanity loses the language of symbols, when dreams are no longer listened to, a rift begins to form between the conscious and unconscious. This rift cannot be seen with the naked eye, but it spreads through every thought, every choice, every vague fear. The conscious mind expands, dominating every field, while the unconscious is pushed deep down, silently accumulating energy like a sleeping volcano. Eventually, the balance is shattered, and what has been suppressed for too long will find a way to surface, sometimes in personal crises, sometimes in the hysteria of an entire era. When the conscious mind separates from the unconscious, people also separate from their inner nature. They become more rational, more precise, but simultaneously hardened and depleted. Instinct is scorned, emotions are imprisoned, the soul becomes arid. People rush to build systems, organizations, technology, believing that through them they can control the chaos of life. But no one can control what they do not understand. What is denied in the individual will become an obsession in the collective, and thus, fragmented souls will combine into a blind crowd searching for external wholeness that they no longer possess within themselves. The world has witnessed this when people lost the ability to converse with their inner darkness. That darkness emerged as fanatical movements, ideologies promising salvation, and leaders worshipped as gods. It was the collective unconscious rising up, demanding recognition. But instead of listening, humanity granted it power. They forgot that every external revolution originates from an internal rift. An unhealed soul will create an unstable society. A peaceful world can only be born from people who have made peace with themselves. Healing the rift is not about returning to the past, but about re-establishing dialogue between humanity's two halves. The conscious mind must learn to listen to the unconscious, not with fear, but with respect for every dream, every emotion, every seemingly irrational impulse, all voices of the forgotten part seeking to return. When we dare to listen, the unconscious ceases to rebel. It returns to its original role, a companion, the soul's silent advisor. Healing does not come from knowledge, but from a harmonious relationship between reason and emotion, between consciousness and instinct. I have seen seemingly depleted individuals regain vitality when they began to dream again. Their dreams gradually softened, images brightened, emotions warmed. They no longer feared the darkness in their dreams, understanding that darkness was a part of their soul returning. When a person accepts what they once avoided, they are no longer haunted by it. From that, suppressed energy transforms into creativity. People begin to paint, write, love, live again, not because they were taught, but because the natural flow of the soul has been unblocked. The path to healing has no formula. It begins by looking directly at the wound and admitting, I am divided. Only in that absolute honesty can the process of reintegration occur, when the conscious mind no longer denies the unconscious, when reason learns to bow before the sacred. Humans find their axis again. That axis is not external, but internal, the intersection of two worlds, light and dark, knowing and not knowing. And from that intersection, we can live a complete life, not perfect, but authentic. In that harmony, humanity also harmonizes with the world. When each individual finds peace within themselves, humanity will cease creating wars to compensate for internal rifts. When people learn to listen to dreams, they also learn to listen to one another. When they stop fearing their instinctual self, they also stop judging the wildness of nature. Self-healing, therefore, is not just a personal act, but a duty to life itself. Each person who heals themselves is contributing a piece of stillness to the world. No one can save humanity if they haven't saved their own soul. All external salvations are temporary if people have not yet reconnected with their inner center. Dreams, with their language of symbols and archetypes, are the open door to that path. Each time we remember, write down, and reflect upon a dream, we are performing a sacred act, listening to the soul speak in the voice of the cosmos. From that listening, a new order arises, not from laws, but from natural balance. I believe the greatest hope of our age lies in humanity's ability to rediscover its connection with its deepest self, not through dogma, not through technology or data, but through silence, through living with dreams, with emotions, with symbols. It is an encounter between humanity and the forgotten sacred. When that encounter occurs, the external world, no matter how chaotic, will no longer drive us to despair. For we will have found within ourselves an unshakable center. Healing the rift between conscious and unconscious is not a short journey, but it is the only path that leads humanity back to wholeness. And in every dream, the soul ceaselessly calls us back. Each person who hears that call will be a spark of light. And when enough sparks ignite together, the darkness of the age will gradually dissipate, not by power, but by the light of self-understanding. When humanity reunites with its soul, humanity will reunite with its own future in an increasingly noisy and intelligent world. The most terrifying thing is not that people don't know, but that they no longer want to know themselves. This book, though written in the last century, still resonates like an echo of today. As society becomes more modern, the soul grows more ancient in its solitude. It reminds us that every true revolution begins in silence, where we dare to look within, dare to touch the dark parts, and admit that we are not yet whole. The greatest lesson here lies not in knowledge, but in simple truth. Only those who understand themselves can live in peace with the world. When we listen to dreams, listen to the strange symbols within us, we are speaking against the current of our age, an age of reason, speed, AI, and data. But it is precisely in this countercurrent act that we preserve human dignity. Jung doesn't teach us to become wise. He merely shows us how to return to instinct, to emotion, to the sacred forgotten in every breath. Dreams don't promise salvation, but they lead us to truth. And sometimes, truth is the only thing that can save us. For when we understand ourselves, we cease to demand that others understand us. When we accept the darkness within, we judge the darkness outside less. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to stand amidst conflict without being consumed. This book teaches us that lesson through a silent yet intense journey, a journey of healing between reason and the unconscious, between humanity and the sacred. And now, as the door of these pages closes, perhaps what still resonates within you is not advice, but a question. Do you still remember your own voice? Not the voice you use for work, for talking, for persuading, but the voice that only rises when everything around you is silent. That voice comes from your deepest self, a place that doesn't need recognition, doesn't need praise, it just needs to be heard. If you dream tonight, try to write down the first dream you remember. Don't try to decipher it, just reread it tomorrow morning as if reading a letter from an old friend. You might not understand it, but some emotion will stir, and that is your soul responding. From that moment, the journey home has opened. This book doesn't end because it doesn't belong to the past. Every time you pause amidst life's hustle, every time you ask yourself, who am I? These pages continue to be written. As long as humanity dares to dream, hope has not yet died. And who knows, your next dream, not of tonight, but of this life, will be a dream of your whole, awakening self.